Anin Bojo Kenwea, Peter Nadishnikos, Scarborough Ninda, Waubashene Ndonjiba Megwa. So, I have decided to tell the story of where I was, where I am, and how I got from there to here. Sounds easy, but when your thirst for story has always taken you between the covers of books that people have told you to read, or worse, 1960s television, well, you can see how your own stories can be lost. As I looked for a starting place, the voice of Percy Cox was suddenly in my head, my grandfather. So briefly, in 1914, Percy Cox left the poor side of London, England, and crossed the Atlantic on a passenger ship. He made a few notes on the trip, mostly describing seasickness and its hopeful remedy, tea. A year later, he was followed by his mother and younger brother. They lived for a while in Port Arthur, Ontario, quite a trip back then. Why they came here remains a mystery. Why they needed to leave England, I can only guess. Could it have been the smell of war? I don't know. This was kept secret, stayed secret. I have ancestors in name, but I don't know them. The English did have the gift for story. So many of those story threads were cut somewhere on the ocean. I know that different events were the reasons for mass migrations, the Irish potato famine, the clearances of the Scottish Highlanders, and the removal of the inconvenient poor from different parts of England to places overseas where their labours were exploited to keep Britain powerful. Does that ring true, Percy? In becoming a secret keeper, were you trying to provide a clean slate for future generations, or were you just surviving? Did we become separated from our spirits on the voyage, or was it 2,000 years before that? I wish I knew my ancestors. After World War II, Percy's son Roy arrived home after taking part in the bombardment of Japanese coastal villages. He and his cohort were full of ambition and relief. The narrative was, war is over, life will be good. That could be heard all through the land. They were also full of PTSD before that disorder even had a name. Roy turned his story into secrets. We were told to go to school and follow the rules, even if you had to ignore who you really were in doing so. Jump through these hoops, and later you can watch Walt Disney or The Lone Ranger on television as a reward. A lot of socialization came out of that cathode babysitter. In school, we had daily history lessons. We learned things like Montezuma was the leader of the Aztecs, a warlike race that needed to be dealt with. And oh yes, there was gold and land. Nobody asked the question, if instead of gold and land, all they had was broccoli and kale, would Hernan Cortez been so keen to conquer? My 10-year-old mind would drift during history lessons and ask questions like this. At some point, we heard about Indian schools, but were allowed to assume that they were places of learning and no more. We knew, kind of, that priests and nuns were there to look after the children. Being a Catholic kid, I would automatically think, must be some boring school, without any suspicion of how bad it really was. More secret keeping. Through the 1960s, Buffy St. Marie was the one voice that somehow found a way to reach the ears of a suburban teenager in Scarborough. She sang about buffalo being gone and someone called Starwalker. Other voices could be found, but you had to go looking for them. Voices like Willie Dunn and Jim Pepper and Shingoose and Duke Redbird. And later on, whenever Buffy or Willie played one of the music festivals in Northern Ontario, some of my co-workers in Sagamok or Wikwimacong would always be in the crowd. Now we get to fast forward. My partner Sharon and I met Dizonge at Mariposa Folk Festival a number of years ago. We were drawn to his paintings and his writings on the back of each one. In a nutshell, a painting was purchased and a friendship was formed. Upon receiving this painting, he said to us, "Well, you know, this means a dinner invitation. What are we having?" This began a friendship of respect and reciprocity that has lasted for years. Dinner was followed by invitations to sweat ceremonies. A voice inside me said, "This is special. This is the kind of thing you do not say no to." More than 5 years went by. During this time, my partner and I attended sweats, built and rebuilt lodges, talked by open fires about who we are and where we came from, and we shared food. We talked about trying to walk through life when you have been separated from your spirit and the harm that can follow. We talked about prejudice and how it has nothing to do with the victim, but is a symptom of the perpetrator's difficulties. We talked about gifts and responsibilities. It was then that Dzunge gifted me with a hand drum. Kind of speechless, all I could say was, well, thank you. I will put this drum to good work. Right after that, we learned about a local drum group, the Chigamik Drummers. They welcomed us and taught us some songs. So it didn't take long for the drum to lead us forward, protecting water and honoring missing and murdered women and girls through the Red Dress campaign. The drum taught us about gifts and responsibilities in action now. We learned about Moosehide campaign when Heather Rankin handed out moosehide patches and information at a concert in Midland. We took this on as a responsibility and became local representatives to help stop violence to women and children in response to the Red Dress campaign. This has led to hundreds of discussions with all kinds of people over the years. Some of these encounters could be challenging. We had to be on alert from time to time, and oh yes, in doing this I finally got to meet Buffy St. Marie and her band backstage at Mariposa and gave them each a moosehide patch. An easy discussion followed. I talked to many parents and their kids while giving guided walks at the Weimarsh. While watching a turtle, I would say something like, well, that turtle's name is Mikanak, or the goose was called Nika for thousands of years. Say those names to yourself in your head 25 times while you're walking along the boardwalk, and you will never forget those names. This is true. This led to an appreciation for the language, and learning Anishinaabe-Moin became an ongoing privilege. Through learning sources such as the TRC Summary, UNDRIP, Indigenous authors, programming on APTN, attending powwows, listening to local elders and knowledge keepers, civic involvement, TRC roundtable discussions and actions, researching the true history of the land that we live on and what has happened here, learning about white privilege and male privilege, and oh yes, paying attention to the land itself. I feel we've come a long way. This has helped foster a sense of place, honor, and reciprocity for land, water, and the life that it supported. This is respect-generating action, and action-generating respect. My responsibility is to know myself well enough to continue this journey in a good way and to end the tradition of secret keepers. Misa'u miigwech.